Hello. Welcome to week 5. We have lots to talk about today. It's very exciting. Today we begin. You may have thought we had already begun. Oh my gosh, yes, I'm an English teacher. You may have thought that we began already 4 weeks ago. We did, in a sense. And what we've been doing prior to today has been setup information. It has been get you prepared information. It has been information that you need that is essential before we begin writing our literary analysis. So we begin literary analysis today, and I'm excited to do this with you. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and we will get this PowerPoint up and running, and we will get started. Let's share sound because we're going to need to do that here in just a bit. Yes, we're going to have sound today. And let me get the slideshow running. Okay. Awesome. Very good. All right, so welcome to Literary Analysis. We have much to discuss. Much to discuss, like how to sniff your book. I'm just kidding. We're not going to be sniffing any books, I promise. Although I do love the smell of books. Absolutely do. All right, so here we start. We're going to begin with the definition of literary analysis that I found that I particularly enjoy, because I feel like this gives us a very clear description of what literary analysis is and what we are going to be doing. Excuse me while I move my things away from my cat. Did not intend for that to be a thing just now. You never quite know with life, do you? Let's see here. Come here. Well, let go. You guys are probably like, oh my goodness, this is Casper. He's our friendly cat. Casper the friendly cat. Okay. All right. Yeah, he's like, no, I don't think so. Don't want to be in your video, Mom. All right. No, but he wants to jump on things and eat all my scraps. I had my lunch over here to my right, and he was going to take off with it. Back to the definition of literary analysis. A literary analysis is not merely a summary of a literary work. Instead, it is an argument about the work that expresses a writer's personal perspective, interpretation, judgment, or critical evaluation of the work. This is accomplished by examining the literary devices, word choices, or word structures, or writing structures, that the author uses within the work. The purpose of a literary analysis is to demonstrate why the author used specific ideas, word choices, or writing structures to convey his or her message. So this is exactly what a literary analysis is. We are going to take the time to demonstrate why the author used specific ideas, word choices, or writing structures, and these fall under the guise of literary devices. Sometimes we will use the term literary elements in this conversation, but in this instance, in this definition, it says literary devices. So we're going to be digging in and discovering about the choices that an author makes and what those choices mean. We're going to be thinking about why this is important and what is it that the author is trying to tell you. Okay, and so that's the purpose of a literary analysis. This definition I took from germana.edu. I really liked the way that they worded it, so I wanted to share it with you. Why do we need to write a literary analysis? Well, it broadens our understanding and appreciation of a piece of literature. And before everybody groans and feels like, literature, you know what? Let's take a look at the definition of literature because it's actually much broader than you might think that it is. So here we are. I just typed in literature on Google just to see what I would find, and I came up with literature. Written works, especially those considered of superior or lasting artistic merit. Okay, so yes, Charles Dickens, William Shakespeare, Emily Bronte, famous names from the past, those are the ones that we think of first when we hear the term literature. But literature also is books and writings published on a particular subject. It also is leaflets and other printed matter used to advertise products or give advice. And the definitions go on. We could click on, if we were to scroll down, we could see there's all these different dictionaries and all these different education sites where they have definitions for literature. And what you discover is basically it's any printed material. Literature is any printed material for the most part. So when we hear the term literature, I don't want you guys being like, ew, I don't like that. I don't want to read Shakespeare, blah, blah. I've already told you we're not going to. We're going to be looking at Stephen King. And Stephen King's writing does fall into the category of literature. So why write one? Well, because it stirs critical thinking. And critical thinking forms new synapses in your brains. You get two benefits for the price of one. Remember that your brain is a muscle, and the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And weight training, if you will, is essential to meet your potential. So we need to be using our minds. We need to be thinking. We need to be practicing critical thinking skills so that our minds stay fresh. And this is a great way to do it. Not just with writing that we're reading, not just with a book, not just with a short story, but news articles, news stories, speeches that you hear, politicians, preachers, all across the board, all across the spectrum of communication, to be able to dig in, to listen, to read, and to dissect their message is a vitally important component for you in your own success. You want to be an individual who can climb that ladder, be successful, be someone who thinks for themselves and makes it on your own, then you've got to develop these critical thinking skills. And they begin in areas like this, simply doing a literary analysis. We're going to take a piece of work and we're going to dissect it. We're going to ask, what is the author trying to say? We're going to exercise our brains. Oh, that was supposed to skip that, but it's fine. So think of this as a brain workout, but also think of yourself as a book sleuth. We're going to be looking for clues. And anytime I hear the word clues, my brain goes to two places, the game Clue and Blue's Clues. So I figured it would be much more entertaining to put a paw print up here on the screen for us. We are looking for clues within the work that will help us understand what an author is saying. So when we begin today, or as we begin today, we are going to watch a literary analysis. And I'm super excited about this. I have a hard time not like talking along with it because I've seen it so many times. But I'm going to play for you this literature analysis. It is of Stephen King's. Let me pull it up. Da-da-da-da-da. It is of Stephen King's It. All right. And so right now I'm going to go ahead and stop the share and get us to the screen where we'll be able to watch this analysis of it. And so here we are. This is Thug Notes on YouTube. There are lots of Thug Notes analyses that you can watch if you are needing something to do on a Saturday and you don't have any homework and you don't have work and you're sitting around wondering, what in the heck can I do with my time? Watch some Thug Notes, because why not? I watched this one right down here while I was eating my lunch. V for Vendetta, Thug Notes, summary and analysis. It was wonderful. So just a little bit of a disclaimer before we get started. He does have a little bit of a dirty mouth. And I feel like I always have to say that. I know there are probably all other college professors who are just like, whatever, we're grown adults. But for me, I'm like, oh, there's that mom in me that's just like, but at the same time, it's so well done that we just can't skip it. And it's fantastic. Listen for the guy's name is Doc Sweets. What's his stage name? It's not his real name, but it's Doc Sweets, and he's going to break down it for us. And after it's over, I'm going to talk with you about some of the things that he has done here in his analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and make it full screen. I also, oh, I can't make it. Oh, I can. Okay, hold on. We're sharing computer sound, and I can resume share. Is it going to? It says your screen sharing is paused. Resume share. It's not going to work. You guys, exit full screen. Now it'll work. Okay, so we can't watch it in full screen. We'll watch it right here. What is theater mode? Can we do it in theater mode? We can. Okay, we're going to do this in theater mode. How very exciting. See, I learned something new today. I like that. Always be learning. So I'm going to go ahead and close my little screen here, and I'm going to do my very best not to be talking along with the video as it plays, because I know that that can be highly annoying, but he's just so fun to quote. And anyway, here we go. Thug Notes, It by Stephen King.
What's happening, baby? This week on Thug Notes, we straight clowning with It by Stephen King. That movie scared the shit out of me. First thing you better recognize is this big-ass book always jumping across 2 time periods. But since telling it like that will be a bitch, I'm gonna lay it on y'all chronologically. The year is 1957, and it's raining balls in the town of Derry, Maine, where little shorty George playing with a paper boat made by his older brother Bill. It's all good till that boat flow into the storm drain where the hell is the clown doing down there? Man, they got some weird crackheads in Derry. Anyway, George tried to snatch that boat back, but the clown straight rips his arm off. Woo! He dead. 3 months go by and a boy named Ben rolling back to the crib when, hold up, that's that same red-nosed hater. The clown asks if he want to grab a balloon and chill, and Ben's tempted, but he say, nah, blood, I'm straight. And the clown turns into a damn mummy, and Ben like, and books it. Later, Ben trying to duck a thug named Henry Bowers and his crew of gangbangers by laying low in the Barrens, where he become tight with 2 homies who also getting their asses whooped by Henry, George's older bro Bill and his cat Eddie. Next day, Ben, Bill, and Eddie ghetto rigging a dam when some other young bloods named Richie and Stan drop by. Turns out, most of them been seeing that clown on the reg. So has a girl named Beverly and a brother named Mike. Together, all these cats make up the Losers Club. And Richie thinking his clown gotta be the one ghosting all these little kids in Derry. Eventually, they recognize the clown shacked up in the sewers and changed shape using some shit called glamour. Apparently, the only way to end that fool is by busting a mad lyrical flow of jokes and riddles while biting on its tongue. Oh, it's called The Ritual of Chewed, and yeah, man, it sounds pretty freaky. But I like it. Mike showed the Losers his daddy's collection of old-ass photos, and what do you know? That clown all up in those crusty stills. Man, this dude older than... Oh, damn! The clown trying to bust out of the photo and be all like, break yourselves, fool, because I'm coming for you. Oh, I don't like this clown, man. So the Losers do the logical thing and get so high and trip balls, imagining it crash on Earth millions of years ago. Later, it gets even whiter when he shapeshifts into the moon and start conversating with Henry Bowers. He slides him a blade and say, psst, bruh, your daddy and that girl Beverly got to go. So Shank, Papa Bowers get tooken out. Henry get the jump on Bev, and while she's struggling, 2 hoods just watch it go down without even doing nothing. But Bev don't play, man. Hi-ya! She kicks him right in the nuts and bails to go hook up with the Losers. Bill starts getting crunk about how all the adults don't give a fuck about what's happening to the kids in Derry. So they decide they gotta be the ones to pull up on that beastie. So they crew up and head down to the sewers. Thing is, Henry and his posse creeping up from behind. But it ain't long before it ghosts both of Henry's boys, and Henry gets lost for hours. After wrecking it with an inhaler and some choice words, the losers roll up on its lair, and Bill gets his ass lost in some kind of a void. And if you think this jam was trippy before, peep this shit out. A giant turtle who created the universe say, yo, if you really want to kill it, you best start laying down that chew. So Bill start flowing, bite down on the monster's tongue, and it scurry away like a little old bitch. Little old clown bitch. After that, the losers can't find their way out of the tunnels. But Beverly got an idea. Hey, boys, drop your drawers and fuck me. Wait, what? These kids are only 11. Steven, man. So after an assembly line of the freak nasty, poof, the losers find their way out of the sewers. They all swear that if the creature ain't dead, they gotta come back and put it in the ground, no matter what. And as for Henry, that fool gets tossed in the loony bin and takes the fall for all of its murders. Damn. 27 years later, children start disappearing in Derry again, and Mike getting suspicious. So he holler at his old crew and say, get your asses over here, bloods. It is back. So all the losers hustle back to Derry, except Stan, who gets so wigged out he slits his damn wrists. Meanwhile, Henry get a visit from it, who tell him it's time to bust out of the big house to get revenge on those losers. The clown being a real dick, making the losers relive all kinds of nasty mess from their childhood. And if that ain't enough, Bev's asshole hubby and Bill's wife come to town unannounced. Later, Henry Bowers shanks Mike at the library, but he's still kicking. With a little help from it, Henry head over to the hotel to ghost the losers. But Eddie keep it clutch and murks Henry the way most gangsters do it, with a bottle of Perrier. Oh, classic. After getting word that Mike got wrecked and it mind controlled Bev's husband and snatched Bill's woman, the losers are all like, enough fucking around, man. Time to end this fool. After seeing more crazy shit, the losers drop in at its digs. Bill, Richie, and Eddie start laying down the ritual of chewed, head up into that void, and it chomps Eddie's damn arm off. He dead. When the monster start crawling away, Ben busts every one of its eggs, and Bill crushes its heart like a G. Now that it's finally dead, they grab Bill's wife and chunk deuces out of the tunnel. No gangbang required this time. All the losers go their separate ways and slowly start to forget what the hell just happened. Bill's wife all whacked out in the head from all the crazy shit she saw, but after Bill gives her a ride on his hoopty-ass childhood bike, she snaps right out of it, but still don't remember what went down. You might be thinking, why would a gnarly beast like it set up shop in a hood like Derry? Well, this spot ain't the innocent small town it seemed like. All that Leave the Beaver bullshit got a dark side brewing under it. People who are crooked, violent, racist as fuck, and don't give a damn about what's happening to these little kids. See, it acting like a mirror of the crooked-ass people in Derry. Just peep this quote of homies jabbering about the monster. The one glimpse I caught of him, it looked like he had a Winchester bolt action. And it wasn't until later that I figured out I must have thought of that because that's what I had. Biff Marlowe thought he had a Remington because that was what he had. And when I asked Jimmy about it, he said that guy was shooting an old Springfield, just like his. Funny, huh? Every brother remember the monster packing the same piece they were packing, repping that the clown is a reflection of all the raw violence inside the heart of all them hood rats. Matter of fact, ain't no mistake that it roll around decked out like a clown. Cause just like a clown, the people of Derry seem nice to the kids on the outside, but on the inside, it's all bullshit. That clown wouldn't even exist if it weren't for Derry's dark deeds. See, it is only able to hit the scene when a horrible event go down, like child abuse or murder. It's like a gnarly cycle where the messed up things the Derry folk do inspires it to terrorize the people, which then encourages the people to do even more whack shit. And cause this cycle just keeps going and going, it's been chilling in Derry for a long ass time. It's become a part of Derry, Something as much a part of the town as the standpipe or the canal or Bassey Park or the library. Only it's not a matter of outward geography. Somehow it's gotten inside. This whole cycle jam go even deeper, cause there be circular imagery all up in this huge ass book. The kids circle back to their hood roots when they return to Derry as adults to lay a whoop on the monster. Beverly replaced her abusive daddy with an abusive husband. The only way they're able to beat it in the end is by throwing back to the mental states of their childhood and flexing their imagination. They even recognize that past events happening all over again. Like when Big Boy Ben peeped some Beezy reading the same story she read to him back in the day. Am I supposed to believe that's just coincidence? Because I don't. Is something really stapling the past and present together here, or am I only imagining it? The losers always form a circle at important points, like when they promise to wreck it if he dares shows his face in Derry again, when adults try to remember what went down back then, and even when everybody gathers around to tap Beverly's ass. Never mind, man. I can't say that shit. She's only like 11. Maybe all this cycle jive just preaching a greater point about evil. Just like it, evil been around since the beginning of time. But it's only when humans arrive that it started to take shape. And since humans keep doing dark deeds over and over again, it been thriving for centuries. So maybe that's King's message. Evil only becomes for real when humans allow it to take control of us and guide all of our nasty qualities like greed, jealousy, and violence. It's always been here, since the beginning of time, since before there were men anywhere. It was here then, sleeping, maybe waiting for the ice to melt, waiting for the people to come. Yo, thanks for chilling with me in my library today, y'all. Peace. And yo, one more thing before you go, because we've got big news.
We're going to go ahead and get that closed. I'm going to close it all the way so that it doesn't come back and start on us at some point. All right, don't need any of that going on. All right, let's jump right back into PowerPoint. All right. Next slide. So, literary analysis helps the reader determine the author's intended meaning. What is the message? Why did the author write this for you and for others, for me? Isn't it interesting to listen to that breakdown? So what Doc Sweets did there is he gave us a summary to begin with. We should always assume that our reader is without knowledge. And so giving a summary is a smart way to begin an analysis. So you break down your short story for your reader in a paragraph or two, and then you give your thesis statement, and then you start your analysis. So your thesis statement might not come until the end of paragraph 2 in this process. And as long as you've done an effective summary, that's going to be just fine. So this is what Doc Sweets did. He gave us a really great summary. He took this giant book and he summarized it in 5 minutes, like 5 minutes, gave us the whole storyline. And then it took him another 5 minutes to do the analysis. And it's a great analysis. He talked about multiple literary devices inside of that analysis. I highly recommend that you watch it another time. And this time, be paying attention when he talks about the different literary devices, right? He talks about characters. He talks about plot. He talks about conflict. He talks about setting. Setting is very important in this piece because it's small town America. It's Derry, Maine. We like to think of small town America, he says, as Leave It to Beaver stuff. But so if you know that reference, you get that. But if you don't, you wouldn't understand that. But what he's saying is we think of small town America as like everything's perfect there. Everyone's nice. Everybody gets along. There's no drama. And the truth of that matter is that's not true. There's drama everywhere there's people. And there's evil everywhere there's people. And this is Stephen King's message. He's saying that evil has been around since the beginning of time, but it takes humans in order to manifest itself. So evil exists, but humans have to make a decision to allow it in. We choose right and wrong. We choose good and evil. And this is what he's saying here. The kids chose to defeat evil. Interesting that he would choose children to initially be the heroes. And they come back as adults, but because of their child experience. So it's an interesting piece. Very interesting. So evil exists, but it requires humans in order for it to act. It requires your choices and my choices. So it's a pretty deep story when you stop and you think about that. And you consider that all of the choices that Stephen King made in this giant book were intended to tell that message. He had a purpose, he had an intent, and he took the readers right along with him. Now, it is possible to read it and not get the message. It's possible. There are some people who read and they don't remember things. They don't draw from things. They don't have the ability to critically think. I have issues with reading comprehension. That might surprise you, but I do. So for me to be able to recall what I've read and to think about what I've read and do any sort of analysis, I have to have a paper copy when I'm reading. And I have to read with a pen in my hand. And so that's something we're going to talk about in here in just a little while, is the importance of reading with a pen in your hand, not just holding it, but actually using it while you're reading. And that's something that I have to do for reading comprehension purposes. But the message is there. We just have to look for it. And how do we look for it? We do a literary analysis. So what is a literary analysis? Well, we've already given it a definition, but it is literary and it is an analysis. For a moment. Sorry about that. That was my phone. We'll get right back into what we were doing here. So it's literary and it's an analysis. It is also an argument, and it will involve research and analysis of secondary sources. So your primary source is your short story. Your primary source is going to be information about your author, but you're also going to need to be using some secondary sources. So in order to be able to do a literary analysis, how to create a literary analysis, that is our next step here. So here's that definition from the beginning again. Since a literary analysis is not merely a summary of a literary work, but instead it is an argument about the work that expresses a writer's perspective, interpretation, judgment, or critical evaluation, we understand that this is accomplished by examining the literary devices, word choices, or writing structures the author uses within the work. So we are going to be looking at literary devices, word choices, and writing structures. Specific choices that an author makes that contain the message within the story. There are a plethora of options to help you in your analysis. So what is a plethora? Well, it just simply means many, but it sure is a fun word. You can add that to your vocabulary if you didn't already have it. So a plethora is many. So before you do anything else, sorry, the very first step after reading your piece is to think about your author. You need to be considering the context of the situation surrounding this story. So the first part of that is, who is your author? Who are they? Where did they grow up? What have been their experiences? Are they political? Are they religious? You need to ascertain information about your author so that you can understand who they are as a person and why perhaps it's important to them to share particular messages. The second part of context that you want to be thinking about is, what is the setting of the writing of this? What's going on in the world at the time it's written? What's going on in the author's life at the time it is written? Those are important things for you to think about as you get started. We need those things as ammunition so that we can fully understand what the author is saying. So we are going to first consider the author. Who are they? What have they been through? What do they believe? What do they do with their spare time? Do they go to church? Do they not go to church? Are they a Republican? Or are they a Democrat? Where do they fall in these lines? So that you can have that as a baseline before we begin doing any sort of analysis. And what's going on in the world at the time it was written? Very important questions for you to consider. So after gaining an understanding of the author's background, consider his or her motivation. Read the author's work carefully and make notes. Highlight unusual or strong word choices. Ask questions. What stands out to you on your first read through, on a second read through, on a third? Think about the author's life and draw correlations. Consider the why behind the writing. So with all of these, a paper copy and a pen in hand are a great idea, especially for those of you who are like me, who have reading comprehension issues. And that's one of the reasons why perhaps you don't enjoy reading something and then talking about what it means, because it's hard for you to remember, it's hard to retain. And then if it's hard to retain, it's almost impossible to think about. So read with a pen in your hand. This is what I do. Read it carefully. Your first time through, you should just read it to read it. Second time through, read it to find stuff. Read it like an investigator. Be looking at word choices, be looking at literary devices, be looking at the structure of the piece. Make notes, ask questions in the margins, circle things, highlight things. Sometimes I use 3 or 4 different colors of highlighters depending on what it is I'm reading and trying to understand. So find what works for you and do that. But a paper copy with a pen in your hand, super good idea. Just saying, listen to me or don't. So think about the author's life and draw correlations. Do you see the author in the story now that you know about the author and you're considering the story deeply? Getting familiar with the story, can you find the author inside of it? So consider the why behind the writing. What specific choices did the author make in the realm of literary devices to sell the message to you? So in order to answer that question, we have to know some things about literary devices. So we're going to take a look at a few of those right now. Some of the basic literary devices are here in the column on the left. These are more common things that people will tend to choose to write about or think about when they are doing an analysis in their minds or on paper. Literary analysis should focus on one or a combination of these. And so some normal, common literary devices, the most normal and most common would be setting, character, and conflict. So if you want to stick to the ones that are generally the easiest, and I put air quotes around that, those would be setting, character, and conflict. But plot, the structure of the piece, can you read through it and see the actual structure that the author has used? Can you see the plot development? Do you see the different choices that the author has made to make the beginning or the introduction a lot longer and more descriptive to pull you in? Does he wait until the end and give you a twist, or is there conflict in the middle? How is it structured? The setting. Setting is vitally important. If you don't know where you are in a story, sometimes the story can't stand. It's got to have setting so that your reader can picture where they are. And so when you are dissecting an author's work, a writer's work, you need to understand the setting or the context of this story. Where is this? Why is this? What's going on? And so that's all part of setting. Point of view. Why that point of view? Why is it in first person? Or why is it in third person limited? Why are we only able to get the perspective of one character? Why are we third person omniscient, where we are inside every character's head or two characters' heads? Why is it in third person objective? Why can't we read any of their thoughts? Those are choices that an author makes. They are intentional, something that you can ponder and think on. Does it move the message? Does it help us understand the message, to consider the point of view and the perspective? Characterization. So characters are a great thing to talk about because a story is built upon characters. Your characters are a vital component. And so this writer, for us, it's Stephen King, is making very specific choices with characters. Why? Who? Who's a dynamic character? Who's a flat character or a static character? Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? What weight do some of the characters have that others don't have, and why? Description. Was there enough? Was it lacking? There's a lot to talk about with characters, and you can break that down and talk about more than one character if you'd like, or just focus on one particular character. But how is the author using characters to tell his story or share his point of view? Symbolism. Now, remember, since we are using Stephen King, we watched a video, I think it was last week, if not the week before, where Stephen King straight up says, I'm not much for symbolism. So he is not writing symbolism into his stories. So if you're finding symbolism and you want to talk about symbolism, he's like, fine, whatever, you go for it, but I didn't mean to put it there. So just keep that in mind when it comes to symbolism. This is not F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is Stephen King. Conflict. Conflict is beautiful. Conflict is a must inside of every story. It's all around us. It's why stories matter. And so conflict is a huge piece to talk about. And your essay can be completely about the conflict in the piece. And I'm going to show you a chart here in just a moment that contains all of the different types. Well, I'm sure there are more, but 9 different types of conflict that you could discuss. And then you're only going to need 3 main points. So if you wanted to just talk about conflict and talk about the 3 different types of conflict that you found inside your story, I'm cool with that, as long as it helps you understand the message and you can help your reader understand the message based on that argument. So conflict is awesome. And it's just some of these others. You can see those there, but they're all important, and different writers make different choices. And so we want to be taking a look at the specific choices that these writers make. Now, on Blackboard, I have given you this comprehensive list of literary elements. So it is 15 pages long. And if you click this link right here, it will also take you to it, but it's 15 pages long. It's under handouts, but it's also under week 5. It's a massive list of literary elements. So you can see here on the screen that some of them have definitions and examples. Others are just hyperlinks. So there are many that are hyperlinks. If I had given every single one of these a definition and an example, this whole thing would have been like 100 pages long as opposed to 15. So we're going to stick with the 15, and you can click on them if you want to read about them. So if you want to be different than just settings, characters, and conflict, and irony, and tone, and voice, and mood, then take a look at the list of literary elements and find something that would be of interest to you. Again, it's easier to write about something if you're interested in it, if you care about it. So if you want to dig into some of these, that's perfectly all right with me. I would appreciate it, actually. So, but setting, characters, and conflict are fine as well. So we're going to go ahead and pass on through that. Here is the conflict chart. I love this. I found this online and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So there are many types of conflict. Here are 9. It might be that you find man versus nature in your story, man versus society, man versus technology. Now, several of our stories in the Night Shift collection are man versus technology, even though they're from the early 70s. We've got the Mangler, we have the Lawnmower Man, we have trucks, man versus technology. So there you go. We could have man versus man, man versus self, man versus reality, which is Night Surf, which we're going to be taking a look at here shortly. Man versus God, man versus no God, and then man versus author, perhaps, like the movie Stranger Than Fiction, which stars Will Ferrell, where he's talking to the author who's writing his life story. Seems kind of like a crazy circle of events, but it is happening in that story. It reminds me of old Daffy Duck cartoons where Daffy would be, I don't know, doing something, and then all of a sudden this giant pencil comes in the screen and would erase like half of his body. But that's man versus author. That mere duck versus cartoonist just makes me giggle. But if you want to just dive in and look at the different types of conflict, I think that that's a worthy thing to do, because life exists, stories exist, argument exists on the back of conflict. And so this is a very worthy thing to dig into. Consider maybe you want to do 2 elements of conflict and setting, or 2 elements of conflict and characters. Whatever it is, 2 elements of conflict and irony. Or maybe you want to do irony, setting, and point of view. That's up to you. Absolutely going to be up to you. All right. So you want to make sure that you are selecting literary devices that have sufficient supporting evidence. Don't just pick anachronism because it sounds cool. Anachronism is when something is out of time. Something is displaced in time in your story. That would be like having a cell phone in the wild, wild west. That's anachronism. It doesn't belong there. So if you're going to look for, if you want to do anachronism, but you're doing the Man Who Loved Flowers, that doesn't work. You're going to really struggle and be pushing it to find evidence for anachronism in the Man Who Loved Flowers. It's just not there. So I mean, maybe you want to make an argument for it, especially now since I said that. You're going to be like, well, I'm going to show her, which is fine. But make sure that your story can or does have the evidence to back up the devices that you want to use. So a book sleuth collecting notes or writing an essay should make sure to include specific details to support claims regarding literary device usage. Be thorough with the work under investigation and its author. We have to be thorough and use very specific information from our stories and as evidence. Your analysis is going to need a strong thesis statement that states the essayist's perspective on the aim and allows it to be debated. The essayist, that's you. You're the essayist. Doesn't that sound nice? It sounds so official, so fancy. The thesis should state an essayist opinion, but it should also allow readers to arrive at their own conclusions. So that's awesome. It's absolutely wonderful. It should state the essayist's opinion, but allow readers to arrive at their own conclusions. So it's just a little bit here. I don't want to like dig into this necessarily too much, but there's a big difference between this first thesis statement and the second one. Huge. The first one has some divisive language in it with the choice of proud behavior, discrimination, arrogance, and preconceptions. Those are strong words that someone else might read and go, excuse me, did you just call Elizabeth Bennet discriminatory? I don't think so. Yes. That's a lot better than just saying Pride and Prejudice is about 5 sisters and their journey to find love. Boring, snorefest, no opinions, nothing divisive. It's just what it is. That's not what we want to do with our thesis statements. We want to make sure that we are organizing our evidence and that we match the evidence to the order of our thesis. Outline, outline, outline. Research, research, research. And interpret it. Interpret your evidence for your readers. Make sure that you're explaining. If you're going to be using some evidence, make sure that you're explaining it so your reader knows why you're using it. And when writing a literary analysis, it's imperative for writers, and I put you there, to make sure that they express their interpretation of the work You must be opinionated in your literary analysis. This is your interpretation, so please be bold. Be careful that the literary analysis is not a summary. If all you give me is a summary, there's no analysis in your essay, that's 30 points right off the top. Just boom, 30 points gone. So don't just write summary. That's no. I have students do that every semester. Every semester without fail, I will get a handful that are just summary. And I'm like, how is this happening? Because I'm so clear about analysis. We are doing an analysis based on setting, character, and conflict, or whatever other devices that you choose to use. I'm even going to give you an outline structure to follow. So I don't understand when students just turn in summaries. Well, I do understand it, because what it means is they didn't listen to the lecture. They didn't read the assignment. They didn't ask questions if they were confused. Yeah, that's what it tells me. So we want to make sure that we are understanding the assignment. It is not to write a summary. It is to write an analysis. All right, now pay attention. It's very important. A little bit of information here that I want to share with you. When you are using other sources, be sure to show how they relate to your thesis. Don't just use random sources. Make sure that you're using sources that actually relate to what you're talking about. And don't overuse any one secondary source, or for that matter, secondary sources in general. On most essays, my rule is only 1 to 2 citations per page, because I want you using your own words. I want this essay to be in your words. And so we'll use research information to back up our words. They're just helping us out. That's all. All right. So never, never, never plagiarize. It will result in a 0 for your grade. All right. So let's talk a little bit about SafeAssign. SafeAssign is the program on Blackboard that I set up for your final drafts. And so your final draft, when you upload it, will be run through SafeAssign, and it is a plagiarism checker. It is interesting. It's a tool. It's a tool for you as well as a tool for me. If you want to see your SafeAssign report and I have not made it available, please let me know, because it's just a click of a button for me to make the reports available for you. And I've tried to make sure that I have done that, but I might have missed it. So please let me know. You want to make sure that you're looking at those reports, because they show the percentage of plagiarism in your essay. They also show you exactly where the plagiarism is and what it is. Very interesting. And here's some of the reasons why it's interesting. It is normal for your report to come back that it's about 18 to 20% plagiarized. And here's the reason. It's the works cited page. We are using academic databases and websites that create our citations for us. And so we're copy and pasting those right from the academic source into our works cited pages. Okay. And so several of you or people across the world are copy pasting these same exact things. And that might come up as plagiarized. It's your works cited page that is not plagiarism. It's SafeAssign is just a software, right? It's just a software. It's not human. It has no grace. It doesn't recognize for this next one. The next thing that it might flag you as plagiarism for is poor punctuation. So SafeAssign doesn't have grace. I have grace. And so if I look and it says you're 32% plagiarized, and I go in and I see that like 20% it's your works cited page, that's not plagiarism, but there's still a 12% that I have to take a look at. Like, what's going on here? Most of the time, what I find is it's punctuation issues. So what you're doing is you're putting the period in the wrong place. Remember, periods come after the parenthetical citation. They do not come before. They do not go inside of the quotation mark. So if you're putting it inside the quotation mark, Safe Assign sees that and goes, well, this isn't right. Plagiarism. So then I get your report and I'm like, what? So I go in, I look, and I see it's improper punctuation surrounding the parenthetical citation or the quote itself. You might have a quotation mark and then a space and then a word, and you didn't intend to have the space. Safe Assign is going to see that space and it's going to be like plagiarism. If your quotation mark is where it's supposed to be, right next to the first letter of the word, it's not going to flag you. So why this is important right now in this class is because let's use this as a tool to get you ready for university or for your science classes or for wherever it is that you're going to be moving from here. Not all professors are grace-filled. Many are not at all. And so if you're messing up in these areas, it's just going to be points off of your papers. But let's go ahead and use Safe Assign as a tool to learn from. So if your paper comes back that it has some plagiarism issues, we want to take a look at the report and we want to consider how we can fix those so that the next essay won't have those same mistakes. Okay? It's awesome, right? I know. It's really actually kind of cool. So we want to do that. I wanted to talk more about those signal phrases, /setup, /lead-in, / what have yous for all quotes and paraphrases. Why do we need to use signal phrases? Well, first of all, they increase your word count. You're welcome. Second, they strengthen your argument. Random quotes carry little to no weight. If you're just tossing quotes or paraphrases into your paper and they don't have a setup, they don't tell why the information is important and who said it, they don't matter. They don't even need to be there. It's a complete waste of time for your reader and for you to have taken the time to even put it in. Take a little bit more time and give it a signal phrase, would you? That way your reader knows who said it and why their words are important. That strengthens your argument. Yes. So if you explain who said what's coming and why their word is important, all of a sudden the quote carries weight to your argument. Example. Stephen King, author of many short stories, including The Man Who Loved Flowers, gave an example of repetition in that particular story that is bone-chilling. He wrote, and he swung the hammer, swung the hammer, swung the hammer, as he had done 5 other times. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, I love it. Give it a signal phrase. Set it up. Set it up. Give your reader that information. Assume they don't have a clue and they need as much from you as possible. Signal phrases also mark boundaries. They mark boundaries between your words and the source's words. By marking the boundaries, you also provide a smooth transition for your reader between words and the source. So when you're using paraphrases in your paper, this really becomes an issue. At least with quotation marks, I can tell where something begins and ends. But if you're just using paraphrases and you have given me no signal phrase, I don't know where that paraphrase starts and I'm confused. I'm going to take off points. So set it up. If you're going to use a paraphrase, very important that you set it up. Don't let me be confused. If I get confused, I just take off points and I'll explain why, but I'm going to take off points. So set it up, mark boundaries. To emphasize the source, call attention to the author or source used. In some cases, such as a literature review or the use of a well-known author, specific information about the source is important for the reader to know. Give adequate and specific details regarding the source. This adds to its credibility. You add to your credibility and your argument's credibility when you use signal phrases. You show that you care about your reader by giving them adequate information. You also strengthen your argument by adding the setup information necessary to understand that quote inside your argument. Credibility is very important if you are going to argue. If you ever have intent to do well in argument, credibility is vital. It also helps you avoid plagiarism, to use signal phrases. All source material must be cited, and signal phrases are one way to cite a source. However, additional citation formatting may be necessary depending on your citation style. Signal phrases are used with in-text citations in MLA. Both are necessary for proper source citation. So you still need a parenthetical citation when a signal phrase is used. In MLA, you use both. They're bookends. Bookends for quotes, bookends for paraphrases. You need both. Here's where we take a break. If you want to pause the video for a few minutes and take a break, this is the time to do that. Because we are about to get started with the next step. And what we're going to do next is we are going to practice. I'm going to read Night Surf, which is from the Night Shift collection. This is by Stephen King. So I'm going to read Night Surf, and then we are going to analyze it. Well, I say we loosely. I'm going to analyze it for you so that you can follow along. All right, so let's practice with Night Surf. Move this up and out of the way, and I'm going to close this so that I'm out of the way. All right. This is Night Surf. After the guy was dead and the smell of his burning flesh was off the air, we all went back down to the beach. Corey had his radio, one of those suitcase-sized transistor jobs that take about 40 batteries and also make and play tapes. You couldn't say the sound reproduction was great, but it sure was loud. Corey had been well-to-do before A6. But stuff like that didn't matter anymore. Even his big radio tape player was hardly more than a nice-looking hunk of junk. There were only 2 radio stations left on the air that we could get. One was WKDM in Portsmouth, some backwoods DJ who had gone nutty religious. He'd play a Perry Como record, say a prayer, bawl, play a Johnny Ray record, read from Psalms, complete with each Selah, just like James Dean in East of Eden, and then bawl some more. Happy time stuff like that. One day he sang Bringing in the Sheaves in a cracked, moldy voice that sent needles in me into hysterics. The Massachusetts station was better, but we could only get it at night. It was a bunch of kids. I guess they took over the transmitting facilities of WRKO or WBZ after everybody left or died. They only gave gag call letters like WDOPE or KUNT or WA6 or stuff like that. Really funny, you know. You could die laughing. That was the one we were listening to on the way back to the beach. I was holding hands with Susie. Kelly and Joan were ahead of us, and Needles was already over the brow of the point and out of sight. Corey was bringing up the rear, swinging his radio. The Stones were singing Angie. Do you love me? Susie was asking. That's all I want to know. Do you love me? Susie needed constant reassurance. I was her teddy bear. No, I said. She was getting fat, and if she lived long enough, which wasn't likely, she would get really flabby. She was already mouthy. You're rotten, she said, and put a hand to her face. Her lacquered nails twinkled dimly with the half moon that had risen about an hour ago. Are you going to cry again? Shut up. She sounded like she was going to cry again, all right. We came over the ridge and I paused. I always have to pause. Before A6, that had been a public beach. Tourists, picnickers, runny-nosed kids, and fat, baggy grandmothers with sunburned elbows. Candy wrappers and popsicle sticks in the sand, all the beautiful people necking on the beach blankets, intermingled stench of exhaust from the parking lot, seaweed, and copper tone oil. But now all the dirt and all the crap was gone. The ocean had eaten it, all of it, as casually as you might eat a handful of Cracker Jacks. There were no people to come back and dirty it again, just us. And we weren't enough to make much mess. We loved the beach too, I guess. Hadn't we just offered it a kind of sacrifice? Even Susie, little bitch Susie with her fat ass and her cranberry bell bottoms. The sand was white and duned, marked only by the high tide line, twisted skein of seaweed, kelp, hunks of driftwood. The moonlight stitched inky crescent-shaped shadows and folds across everything. The deserted lifeguard tower stood white and skeletal some 50 yards from the bathhouse toward the sky like a finger bone. And the surf, the night surf, throwing up great bursts of foam, breaking against the headlands for as far as we could see in endless attacks. Maybe that water had been halfway to England the night before. Angie, by the stones, the cracked voice on Coria's radio said, "I'm sure you dug that one, a blast from the past that's a golden gas straight from the graveyard, a platter that matters. I'm Bobby. This was supposed to be Fred's night, but Fred got the flu. He's all swelled up." Susie giggled then, with the first tear still on her eyelashes. I started towards the beach a little faster to keep her quiet. "Wait up," Corey called. "Bernie! Hey, Bernie! Wait up!" The guy on the radio was reading some dirty limericks, and a girl in the background asked him where did he put the beer. He said something back, but by that time we were on the beach, I looked back to see how Corey was doing. He was coming down on his backside as usual, and he looked so ludicrous I felt a little sorry for him. "Run with me," I said to Susie. "Why?" I slapped her on the can and she squealed. "Just because it feels good to run." We ran. She fell behind, panting like a horse and calling for me to slow down, but I put her out of my head. The wind rushed past my ears and blew the hair off my forehead. I could smell the salt in the air, sharp and tart. The surf pounded. The waves were like foamed black glass. I kicked off my rubber sandals and pounded across the sand barefoot, not minding the sharp digs of an occasional shell. My blood roared. And then there was the lean-to with Needles already inside, and Kelly and Joan standing beside it, holding hands and looking at the water. I did a forward roll, feeling sand go down the back of my shirt, and fetched up against Kelly's legs. He fell on top of me and rubbed my face in the sand while Joan laughed. We got up and grinned at each other. Susie had given up running and was plodding toward us. Corey had almost caught up to her. "Some fire," Kelly said. "Do you think he came all the way from New York like he said?" Joan asked. "I don't know." I couldn't see that it mattered. He had been behind the wheel of a big Lincoln when we found him, semi-conscious and raving. His head was bloated to the size of a football and his neck looked like a sausage. He had Captain Trips and not so far to go either. So we took him up to the point that overlooks the beach and burned him. He said his name was Alvin Sackheim. He kept calling for his grandmother. He thought Susie was his grandmother. This struck her funny, God knows why. The strangest things strike Susie funny. It was Corey's idea to burn him up, but it started off as a joke. He had read all those books about witchcraft and black magic at college, and he kept leering at us in the dark beside Alvin Sackheim's Lincoln and telling us that if we made a sacrifice to the gods, maybe the spirits would keep protecting us against A6. Of course, none of us really believed that bullshit, but the talk got more and more serious. It was a new thing to do, and finally we went ahead and did it. We tied him to the observation gadget up there. You put a dime in it, and on a clear day, you can see all the way to the Portland headlight. We tied him with our belts, and then we went rooting around for dry brush and hunks of driftwood like kids playing a new kind of hide and seek. All the time we were doing it, Alvin Sackheim just sort of leaned there and mumbled to his grandmother. Susie's eyes got very bright, and she was breathing fast. It was really turning her on. When we were down in the ravine on the other side of the outcrop, she leaned against me and kissed me. She was wearing too much lipstick, and it was like kissing a greasy plate. I pushed her away, and that was when she started pouting. We went back up, all of us, and piled dead branches and twigs up to Alvin Sackheim's waist. Needles lit the pyre with his Zippo, and it went up fast. At the end, just before his hair caught on fire, the guy began to scream. There was a smell just like sweet Chinese pork. Got a cigarette, Bernie? Needles asked. There's about 50 cartons right behind you. He grinned and slapped a mosquito that was probing his arm. Don't want to move. I gave him a smoke and sat down. Susie and I met Needles in Portland. He was sitting on the curb in front of the State Theater playing Lead Belly tunes on a big old Gibson guitar he had looted someplace. The sound echoed up and down Congress Street as if he were playing in a concert hall. Susie stopped in front of us, still out of breath. You're rotten, Bernie. Come on, Sue. Turn the record over. That side stinks. Bastard. Stupid, unfeeling son of a bitch. Creep. Go away, I said, or I'll black your eye. Susie, see if I don't. She started to cry again. She was really good at it. Corey came up and tried to put an arm around her. She elbowed him in the crotch and he spit in her face. I'll kill you. She came at him, screaming and weeping, making propellers with her hands. Corey backed off, almost fell, then turned tail and ran. Susie followed him, hurling hysterical obscenities. Needles put back his head and laughed. The sound of Corey's radio came back to us faint over the surf. Kelly and Joan had wandered off. I could see them down by the edge of the water, walking with their arms around each other's waists. They looked like an ad in a travel agent's window. Fly to beautiful St. Lorca. It was all right. They had a good thing. Bernie? What? I sat and smoked and thought about Needles flipping back the top of his Zippo, spinning the wheel, making fire with flint and steel like a caveman. I've got it, Needles said. Yeah? I looked at him. Are you sure? Sure I am. My head aches. My stomach aches. Hurts to piss. Maybe it's just Hong Kong flu. Susie had Hong Kong flu. She wanted a Bible. I laughed. That had been while we were still at the university, about a week before they closed it down for good. A month before they started carrying bodies away in dump trucks and burying them in mass graves with payloaders. Look, he lit a match and held it under the angle of his jaw. I could see the first triangular smudges, the first swelling. It was A6, all right. Okay, I said. I don't feel so bad, he said. In my mind, I mean. You, though, you think about it a lot, I can tell. No, I don't. I lie. Sure you do. Like that guy tonight. You're thinking about that, too. We probably did him a favor when you get right down to it. I don't even think he knew it was happening. He knew. He shrugged and turned on his side. It doesn't matter. We smoked and I watched the surf come in and go out. Needles and Captain Trips. That made everything real all over again. It was late August already, and in a couple of weeks, the first chill of fall would be creeping in. Time to move inside someplace. Winter. Dead by Christmas, maybe all of us. In somebody's front room with Corey's expensive radio tape player on top of a bookcase full of Reader's Digest condensed books and the weak winter sun lying on the rug in meaningless window pane patterns. The vision was clear enough to make me shudder. Nobody should think about winter in August. It's like a goose walking over your grave. Needles laughed. See, you do think about it. What could I say? I stood up. Gonna look for Susie. Maybe we're the last people on Earth, Bernie. Did you ever think of that? In the faint moonlight, he already looked half dead, with circles under his eyes and pallid, unmoving fingers like pencils. I walked down to the water and looked out across it. There was nothing to see but the restless, moving humps of the waves, topped by delicate curls of foam. The thunder of the breakers was tremendous down here, bigger than the world, like standing inside a thunderstorm. I closed my eyes and rocked on my bare feet. The sand was cold and damp and packed. And if we were the last people on Earth, so what? This would go on as long as there was a moon to pull the water. Susie and Corey were up on the beach. Susie was riding him as if he were a bucking bronc, pounding his head into the running boil of the water. Corey was flailing and splashing. They were both soaked. I walked down and pushed her off with my foot. Corey splashed away on all fours, spluttering and woofing. I hate you, Susie screamed at me. Her mouth was a dark, grinning crescent. It looked like the entrance to a fun house. When I was a kid, my mother used to take us to Harrison State Park, and there was a fun house with a big clown face on the front. You walked in through the mouth. Come on, Susie. Up, Fido. I held out my hand. She took it doubtfully and stood up. There was damp sand clotted on her blouse and skin. You don't have to push me, Bernie. You don't ever. Come on. She wasn't like a jukebox. You never had to put in a dime, and she never came unplugged. We walked up the beach toward the main concession. The man who ran the place had a small overhead apartment. There was a bed. She didn't really deserve a bed, but Needles was right about that. It didn't matter. No one was really scoring the game anymore. The stairs went up the side of the building, but I paused for just a moment to look at the broken window, at the dusty wares inside that no one had cared enough to loot. Stacks of sweatshirts, Anson Beach, and a picture of sky and waves printed on the front, glittering bracelets that would green the wrist on the second day, bright junk earrings, beach balls, dirty greeting cards, badly painted ceramic Madonnas, plastic vomit, so realistic, tried on your wife. 4th of July sparklers for a 4th that never was. Beach towels with a voluptuous girl in a bikini standing amid the names of a hundred famous resort areas. Pennants, souvenirs of Anson Beach and Park, balloons and bathing suits. There was a snack bar up front with a big sign saying, "Try our clam cake special." I used to come to Anson Beach a lot when I was still in high school. That was 7 years before A6. And I was going with a girl named Maureen. She was a big girl. She had a pink checked bathing suit. I used to tell her it looked like a tablecloth. We had walked along the boardwalk in front of this place barefoot, the boards hot and sandy beneath our heels. We had never tried the clam cake special. What are you looking at? Nothing, come on. I had sweaty, ugly dreams about Alvin Sackheim. He was propped behind the wheel of his shiny yellow Lincoln, talking about his grandmother. He was nothing but a bloated, blackened head and a charred skeleton. He smelled burnt. He talked on, and after a while, I couldn't make out a single word. I woke up breathing hard. Susie was sprawled across my thighs, pale and bloated. My watch said 3:50, but it had stopped. It was still dark out. The surf pounded and smashed. High tide. Make it 4:15. Light soon. I got out of bed and went to the doorway. The sea breeze felt fine against my hot body. In spite of it all, I didn't want to die. I went over in the corner and grabbed a beer. There were 3 or 4 cases of Bud stacked against the wall. It was warm because there was no electricity. I didn't mind warm beer, like some people do. It just foams a little more. Beer is beer. I went back out on the landing and sat down and pulled the ring tab and drank up. So here we were, with the whole human race wiped out, not by atomic weapons or biowarfare or pollution or anything grand like that, just the flu. I'd like to put down a huge plaque somewhere, in the Bonneville Salt Flats maybe, Bronze Square, 3 miles on a side, and in big raised letters it would say, for the benefit of any landing aliens, just the flu. I tossed the beer can over the side. It landed with a hollow clank on the cement walk that went around the building. The lean-to was a dark triangle on the sand. I wondered if Needles was awake. I wondered if I would be. Bernie? She was standing in the doorway wearing one of my shirts. I hate that. She sweats like a pig. You don't like me much anymore, do you, Bernie? I didn't say anything. There were times when I could still feel sorry for everything. She didn't deserve me any more than I deserved her. Can I sit down with you? I doubt if it would be wide enough for both of us. She made a choked hiccuping noise and started to go back inside. Needles has got A6, I said. She stopped and looked at me. Her face was very still. Don't joke, Bernie. I lit a cigarette. He can't. He had A2, Hong Kong flu, just like you and me and Corey and Kelly and Joan. But that would mean he isn't immune. Yes, then we could get it. Maybe he lied when he said he had A2, so we'd make him take along with us that time, I said. Relief spilled across her face. Sure, that's it. I would have lied if it had been me. Nobody likes to be alone, do they? She hesitated. Coming back to bed? Not just now. She went inside. I didn't have to tell her that M was no guarantee against A6. She knew that. She had just blocked it out. I sat and watched the surf. It was really up. Years ago, Ansett had been the only halfway decent surfing spot in the state. The point was a dark, jutted hump against the sky. I thought I could see the upright that was the observation post, but it probably was just my imagination. Sometimes Kelly took Joan up to the point. I didn't think they were up there tonight. I put my hands in my face and clutched it, feeling the skin, its grain and texture. It was all narrowing so swiftly, and it was all so mean. There was no dignity in it. The surf coming in, coming in, coming in, limitless, clean, and deep. We had come here in the summer, Maureen and I, the summer after high school, the summer before college, in reality, an A6 coming out of Southeast Asia and covering the world like a pall. July, we had eaten pizza and listened to her radio. I had put oil on her back. She had put oil on mine. The air had been hot, the sand bright, the sun like a burning glass. Oh, night surf. It's interesting, isn't it, that this was written? Let me tell you exactly when this was written. I want to look it up. I don't want to be wrong. I want to get the date right. Night Surf, Stephen King. 69. Originally published in spring of 1969. All right, so this up. Yeah, I want to have this actually right here in front of me. All right, I've got this. All right, so this is Night Surf, and this was written in 1969 by Stephen King. So he was a fairly young man when this was written. Here, hold on just a second. I need you to move, little cat. Go, go. There. Need to close the door. I'm sorry, there was so much noise while I was reading the story. I didn't want to stop. We're doing work on our house. So back to Night Surf, the 1969. Now, what you're looking at right here on the screen, these are just some questions that I want to walk us through. This is not the outline worksheet. I do not want you filling out this as a questionnaire or a worksheet. I say that, and then every semester I have students who are like, are we filling out the literary worksheet and the outline? And I'm like, no, no, this is not a homework worksheet. This is just talking points. I hope you see that on the screen. Just talking points, kind of like a thought process. So the title of our selection is Night Surf. The author is Stephen King. The genre, I think this falls under horror. It's scary. It's overwhelming. It's definitely drama. So it could fall under both. I think that we need to redefine, don't you, what our definition of horror is, the genre horror. I think that we tend to think that horror means that it is all slashing, grossness, and gore. And horror is actually quite large. There are a lot of things in life that are just downright horrifying. A lot of things. And this story, if you think about it in that sense, is somewhat horrifying. Because here you are, everyone's gone. Everyone on the planet has been sick. And if they haven't had it yet, chances are good you're still going to get it. That's scary, especially considering what we've just lived through. But anyway, Stephen King wrote this in 1969. This is not something he's written during the COVID pandemic or something that he wrote when AIDS first hit the scene. No, this was written in 1969. So I'm going to share with you a really interesting detail about that here in just a moment. So that's genre. The setting is we are in New England on a beach. Stephen King himself is from Maine, lives in Maine, has always lived in Maine. And so he tends to write about areas that are native to him. There are a few things here that give us the idea that we are on the East Coast. The radio stations all starting with W, for instance. Radio stations that begin with W are on the east of the Mississippi. On the west side of the Mississippi, radio stations begin with a K. Not sure if you knew that, but it is a true statement. So we know that we are on the East Coast. And there are other bits of information throughout the short story that give us clues as to where we are. The historical context. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. And this is that whole dig into who the author is and dig into the context of your story. Like, this is what I'm trying to walk you through right here. Did you know that in 1968 there was a pandemic? And it was the H3N2 virus. 1968 pandemic was caused by an influenza A, so a flu. H3N2 comprised of 2 genes from an avian influenza A virus, including a new H3 hemagglutinin, but also contained the N2 neuraminidase from the 1957 H2N2 virus. It was also first noted in the United States in September of 1968. The estimated number of deaths was 1 million worldwide and about 100,000 in the United States. Most excess deaths were in people 65 years and older. The H3N2 virus continues to circulate worldwide as a seasonal influenza A virus. Seasonal H3N2 viruses, which are associated with severe illnesses in older people, undergo regular antigenic drift. So, not sure if you guys realize it, but like every 8 to 10 years, there is some kind of pandemic that hits the world. Some virus that goes all the way around the planet. This whole COVID thing, most of you are fairly young. This whole COVID thing isn't new. We just responded to it different this time for certain. But it's not new. There have been pandemics happening all throughout history. And some of them have been really bad. 1918, really bad. The bubonic plague, really bad. Really bad. 1957, 58, there was one. 1930, 1918, 2009. But there have been others throughout there. That's just the list that I'm looking at right here on this website. It's a CDC site. CDC, they're so reputable. So that's where I'm looking right now. But so the historical context is there was a pandemic in 1968, and Stephen King wrote this right after that. You think maybe he was aware of this flu? Do you think maybe as a young man he was afraid or concerned about this flu? Do you think maybe he sat around thinking about what if regarding this flu that hit the world? Well, absolutely he did. Absolutely he did. So in his mind, a story formulated. Let's say everybody dies, that handful. What happens then? What do you do? How do you live life? You know that was in his mind because some of you have had crazy thoughts since COVID began, right? It makes us think, what if? What if everyone dies? What if this happens? What if that happens? We have those thoughts. Well, Stephen King just took to paper with his, and he wrote Night Surf. Is that wild? Yes, that's wild. Absolutely, that's wild. Does it make sense that he would write this? Yes, it does. Especially when we think about the context of his life in 1969. He was a very young man. I'm not sure if this was when he was still in college or if he was teaching high school English at this time. Let's see. Oh, he was still in college in 1969 when he wrote this story. So this is something that he did when he was still in school. He hadn't even become an English teacher yet. That's awesome. That's awesome. This is before he started working at the industrial laundromat too. He wrote Night Surf. So he was still a college student when he wrote this. College student like you guys. How interesting. It's a college student who went through a pandemic while he was in college. Huh. Sounds familiar. So that's a cool thing to know about as we consider why he wrote this. So, what was the author's tone toward the subject as he wrote it? Do you feel like he had some fear written into it? Could you get that kind of a vibe from him, from Bernie? This hopelessness. That's the word that I'm coming up with, is hopelessness. Like, it's Stephen King working through his own hopeless feelings in the face of the end of this pandemic. Like, what if it keeps going? What if it kills everyone? What if? And then you know it's going to kill you. And what do you do with yourself? I think maybe there was some fear there involved. Well, yes, there was. Absolutely, there was. So, what point of view was this told from? This is told from Bernie's perspective. So, this is third person limited. We are in Bernie's head. That's it. That's the only character that we get to see things from. And what's interesting there is third person limited, pretty good indication that you're getting the author's actual thoughts. Okay, so that's kind of wild. I like that idea that we're actually getting into the mind of Stephen King and his perspective on this pandemic and the situation that they're in. He's looking at it through Bernie's eyes, and Bernie's just kind of like, whatever. It is what it is. Can't do anything about it. That very hopeless, just, gonna do right now, I guess. And he's sitting there and watching the waves. Stephen King says he doesn't use symbolism, but I think we could talk about symbolism in Night Surf with the waves. It goes in and out and in and out, and it will just continue to do so even when all the people are gone. That's not going to change. The moon will still continue to control the tide, whether you're there or not. Wow. And Bernie just sits and watches it. And that's why it's called Night Surf. Hopeless. So discuss the characters in the piece. Well, we could talk about Bernie and Needles and Susie and Joan and Kelly and Corey. These are our main characters. We have Alvin Sackheim, who shows up, who's sick, and they help him out of his misery, but kind of in a graphic way. But you've got this group of people that didn't know each other before, that have come together now because they are the survivors, and they're trying to be in friendship / relationship with one another, and it's hard and it's awkward, and they're always suspicious, and they're going to drop like flies. So characters are going to be an interesting thing to talk about in this piece. List the conflicts. So what type of conflicts are in here? We definitely have man versus nature. Definitely man versus nature. We have man versus self because Bernie's having some internal conflict. We could say we have man versus man, the situation with Alvin Sackheim. Yeah, there's a lot of conflict in this piece. A lot. You could dig into more if you really wanted to. And did the author use any special literary elements? Well, absolutely, he does. We definitely have setting. Setting is very important, and he goes into extensive discussion of the surf and the beach and the store and these places. So we have a very strong feeling for where we are. Um, there's elements of humor throughout. Don't know that we had any foreshadowing. No, no. He has flashback. There's flashback in this. They tell in hindsight what they did to Alvin Sackheim, and he tells about his former girlfriend Maureen, and he tells in hindsight about his mom. So there's a lot of flashback in this piece. So you could be looking at all these different literary devices and thinking about, what do I see strongest here? And perhaps it might be easiest just to talk about settings, character, and conflict, which is perfectly fine. Or maybe settings, flashback, and conflict. I think that that's what I would like to do: settings, flashback, and conflict. So this is a good time to break out the writing and outline worksheet. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Ha ha. Use it. So there it is. So why did Stephen King write this story? What was his aim? And so we would come up with a thesis statement. We would use our main points, which I am telling you, I think that talking about the setting, the flashbacks, and the conflict would be the way to go with this piece for me, in my opinion. And I could flesh all of this out right here if I wanted to, but we've been talking for quite a while, and I'm sure you guys are ready to turn this off, which is fine. I understand. And honestly, I'm needing to get some water because my throat's getting really dry. So I'm going to be wrapping this up here. We still have to talk about what your assignment is, and I do have a sample outline for you coming up. So Stephen King's aim with Night Surf, what's he saying? What's he letting us know? Perhaps that we're all vulnerable. It can happen to you. Something interesting to think about. I'm not giving that away because some of you might have chosen Night Shift. So we did it. Yay. All right, now we write. So your assignment is going to be just the outline this weekend, just the outline. So you're going to conduct a literary analysis of your chosen Night Shift short story. What is Stephen King's aim? And it is shown through 3 literary elements. So how do we do this? I'm going to show you a potential outline. But first, let's look at how the next 4 weeks play out. So here is our next 4 weeks from the course schedule. So in week 5, your homework is the outline. We have discussed literary analysis. I have semi-done one for you. We've kind of broken down Night Surf, but I didn't give you a full conclusion. Don't feel like I should, because some of you might be writing about it. But week 5, homework is the outline. You're going to create your literary analysis outline over your Night Shift story. Stephen King's message is what? Please don't leave that part out. I have students leave that part out every semester, and I don't understand how that part gets left out. The point of your thesis statement is Stephen King's message is blank, based on your 3 literary elements. All right, week 6, next week, we will be discussing editing using checklists and rubrics. I'm very excited about it. I love editing. Editing is the magic. So I'm going to be giving you guys some really good information on editing. You will also begin writing your rough drafts. All right. Week 7, we are going to discuss how to do peer review, and we are going to practice. Well, I got to figure out how we're going to practice peer review, but we are going to get ready for peer review, and you will continue to work on your rough drafts. Week 8, you will upload your rough draft to Blackboard under its assignment spot, but also in your peer review group. In week 7, I will have prepared you for the peer review, so you don't need to stress about it now. We still have time, and I'm going to make it very clear how we're going to do this. But you will be putting your essay into the peer review group that you are assigned to. Week 8 will be spent in peer review. So you will have a group of papers that you will be reviewing, and you will have until a certain day to get those done. And then the final drafts will be due the week of, or week 9. So I believe they're due on March 20th, right when you get back from spring break. So yeah, due after spring break is over. So you're going to have an extra week in there to be working on these. Isn't that wild? I think that's pretty wild. So we're not going to be turning in the final draft for 4 more weeks. That's huge. But I want to take the time with this first essay, really spread it out. Well, we already wrote the narrative, but you know what I mean. This is our first this isn't a literary analysis. So we're going to spread it out and walk through it step by step. My plan is to take a look at your outlines next week before you start writing your rough drafts and let you know, yes, your thesis is good, or your thesis needs a little work, or your main points are on target, or you might want to consider changing this or whatnot and so forth. So I will be looking at those outlines so that you can jump into your rough draft with some confidence. So outlining, woohoo! Complete the outline for your literary analysis. That is what we're doing. Yay! So here is an example. Don't follow this to the T, but this is an example. But you know what? Yeah, you can. You can follow this to the T, but change the thesis statement. So there's your thesis statement. You can see mine is The Man Who Loved Flowers tells the age-old tale that you can't tell a book by its cover through setting, character, and conflict. So my main points are setting, character, and conflict. And here are the subpoints that I came up with. And I thought these would be a really healthy way to build this essay. So they're the same under each one. A, define the literary term. Define what setting is inside of literature research. B, examples from the text. And C, this supports King's aim by, and then state your opinion. So the same for character, same for conflict, and then restate your conclusion. So that is an example outline for this essay. I hope that it is helpful. And if you do have any questions, you know that you can reach out and text me. Do refer to Blackboard for due dates and essay guidelines. Those are under week 5, and they'll be under week 6 and 7. They'll be all over the place. They're also on your course schedule, which is on your syllabus. And so if you scroll through your syllabus and you get to your course schedule, it's going to have the dates laid out there. And if you keep scrolling on your syllabus, you get to the assignments, the essay assignments, and you find essay 2, and you'll find all of the due dates are written in there as well. So awesome stuff. I'm trying to make this as not confusing as I can for you. So I hope that you have a good time digging into your Stephen King short story. If you do have any questions, send me a text message and I will do my very best to answer those. I'm going to jump off of here so I can get this uploaded for you guys. All right. See ya.